My name is Jennifer Crumbley, and I'm the defendant in this case.
Did you ever go through his text messages, go through his bedroom? What kind of a parent were you in terms of going through those things?
I did not go through his text messages. I didn't have a reason to. His bedroom I would go through when I clean it. When I come across things, I look through it to see if there was something you could keep or throw away. I'm sure I saw them, but they just didn't stick out to me till this case.
Why didn't they stick out to you?
Because it wasn't anything that was anything serious. It was Ethan just messing around.
I want help, but my parents don't listen to me, and I can't get any help.
I want to talk about mental health. Did you ever believe that your son needed mental health treatment, therapy, counseling, anything?
No.
Did you ever deny him or say, no, I'm not going to take you to a mental health professional? Did he ever ask you?
No. I mean, one time, when he was talking about what he wanted to do for his future, I don't know, he was feeling really down about it and stressed. My husband did call his school counselor. I guess when I was out shopping, they said, well, let's go try on Black Friday, see if we can get one on sale.
Did you object? Did you say, I don't want that gun in the house? Anything like that?
No, I was more angry that they cut into our Christmas tree time.
Did he have free access to that gun?
No, it was for him to use at the shooting range only.
Was he allowed to take it out?
Not without my husband around.
Did he know where it was kept?
My husband hid it usually in our bedroom in different spots.
Okay. What was the intention of hiding it?
That's just what you're supposed to do.
Are you a failure as a parent?
I don't think I'm a failure as a parent, but at that time, I guess I felt bad that Ethan was sad at those things, and I guess I don't know, I just felt like I failed somewhere. Of course, I look back after this all happened, and I've asked myself if I would have done anything differently, and I wouldn't have.
If you could change what happened, would you?
Oh, absolutely. I wish he would have killed us instead.
James and Jennifer Crumbley, the parents of the Oxford High School shooter, facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter.
We find the defendant guilty.
Jennifer guilty on all counts, and now James Crumbley heads to trial. Hi, I'm Christy McDonald, and thanks so much for joining me here at the Oakland County Courthouse in Pontiac, the night before James Crumbley's trial is set to begin. You watched Jennifer's trial streaming with us here on Local 4+, and tomorrow begins jury selection in James's case. It is going to be another difficult process for the families of those who lost loved ones at Oxford High School back on November 30th, 2021. Tate Meir, Justin Schilling, Hannah St. Juliana, and Madison Baldwin. These families have to sit through the testimony all over again, as prosecutors have to prove this time that it was James who was grossly negligent in the deaths of 4 students, and he could have foreseen that his son could do something like this. There are similar and some differences in this case that will begin to unfold starting here tomorrow in court. So we're going to walk you through what we could see in James Crumbley's trial, how storage of the gun could come into play, what messages could be most damaging, what different witnesses are allowed. Could James take the stand like his wife did? And the biggest viewer questions so far. So let's get started with our legal experts, Detroit criminal defense attorney Lillian Diallo and Butzel criminal defense attorney George Danini.
All right, Lillian, here we go. Round 2. Why is this case resonating so much with people?
Because parents are frightful and scared that all of a sudden they're going to be held liable and responsible for unforeseen actions of their children. This is not that. This is something the prosecutors alleging was foreseeable, right? We knew there were some issues going on with the shooter, allegedly. Well, I'm certainly do, right? We can see that through the text messages. I'm not so certain as to what Dad knew and how Dad knew, because it seemed just from the text messages that he was not in a good state in his head at that time.
What are going to be, I think, the differences and similarities in the trial when you have 2 parents that were initially their cases were connected, but now being tried separately? We're going to see some of the same things.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, certainly from the prosecution standpoint, I'm sure they would rather have only done this once. So their the way they'll handle the case will, I would imagine, largely be the same. I've seen some reporting where they've added to their witness list, and we may talk about that. And maybe they'll have witnesses who did testify in the first trial not testify this go around. But by and large, I would think the presentation of the evidence by the prosecution would be very similar.
Does it hurt or help James Crumbley to be tried second?
Well, I think I'd say both. I think it hurts in the sense that the prosecution has done it once already, and so they've presumably learned from their mistakes, if any. They'll do better, I would think, the second go around in terms of the presentation of the evidence, because they've been able to run through it once, and the defense lawyer has not. I'm sure the defense lawyer paid attention to what happened in the first trial, but being in the courtroom is a different experience than kind of watching it on TV or reading a transcript. Helpful in the sense that some lessons can be learned, the things that worked, didn't work. There's a lot of people that are, maybe myself included, Monday morning quarterbacking some things. And so, if they're paying attention to that, can kind of adjust their strategies accordingly.
Let's talk about maybe some of the witnesses that we'll see that are different in this case. There's already, the defense doesn't want two witnesses. The prosecution has list students that would be talking about witnessing the shooting. And we also have some other witnesses that have said that maybe it's too emotional to go through this again. What's the balance of trying to figure out the prosecution in putting maybe different witnesses that we'll see?
Yeah, so the defense lawyer has said, what happened on that day, even they agree, everybody agrees was terrible. It's really not all that relevant to what he has been charged with, what Jennifer Crumbley was charged with. What they were charged with and what are charged with is what did or didn't they do in kind of the lead up. And so really, I tend to agree that a lot of these details are not appropriate to come in during the trial. In the first trial, the judge let a lot of those things in, at least through those 4 school witnesses.
So I looked down and I realized he's raising a gun to me.
It seemed so odd that it was him. So I said, "Buddy, are you okay? What's going on?" And when he didn't respond to me and he looked away, that's when I knew it was him, that he was the shooter.
I've encouraged parents to be able to get their son and or daughter help and therapy. I had never had it where it was feeling like I needed to push to make it happen.
And you say the feeling like you needed to push to make it happen. That's what you're experiencing November the 30th, 2020.
That is correct.
You said you had the backpack with you and you provided it to the student?
Yeah.
Okay. At any point, did anybody request to search the backpack?
They did not know.
And did you search the backpack yourself?
I did not. It wasn't necessary or rise to the occasion that I do that because I didn't have any reasonable suspicion.
I saw some of the filings, the fact that a counselor or a dean after their testimony felt like that was maybe overwhelming to them and they don't want to do it again. You're going to then put a child up and have the child endure that. I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense, but the prosecution wants, for whatever reason, whether to put a motion into the case or what have you, that kind of information in front of the jury.
What are some of the similarities and the differences that we see?
Well, we know we won't get in any of Mom's business, right? How she had a dalliance with his son. None of those things will come in this trial, nor should they. The students testifying, that would be new, right? And that may be because the prosecutor is regrouping based on everything that happened at trial number 1. So prosecutors regroup as well as defense attorneys, right? So they want to put on a better case that goes to James Crumbley because apparently, from what I can hear and see, he's a more sympathetic figure. And you want to try to make it more emotionally based. Like when you put the shooting up on the screen, I would have objected 7 ways to Sunday and then again, right? It's about, we know the horrendousness of what happened and it's unthinkable, it's horrific, right? But did you leave this weapon out so that your son could get to it? That's the issue. Not that he slaughtered all the people that he slaughtered, which he did, unexcusably. It's the access, and is the parent responsible for the actions of their child that are not foreseeable. They're talking about this is so foreseeable. Well, they're going to have to make it foreseeable for James Crumbley.
How will the defense and the prosecution learn from Jennifer's trial?
Make sure you keep out what's supposed to be out and keep focused, right? Just keep focused on your case. Don't worry about the spotlight. Don't worry about the comments. You just focus in on your client and your client's defense. So if I were, and I'm not, and I don't try to tell defense attorneys what to do because it's a hard, lonely job, right? But if I were on that defense team, James Crumbley would be more sympathetic. So if he went on the witness stand, and I don't know if they're going to put him on the witness stand or not, certainly don't ever say, I wouldn't change a thing, because I think that took the air and the breath out of most of us.
Of course, I look back after this all happened, and I've asked myself if I would have done anything differently, and I wouldn't have.
And we are like hardened, seasoned professionals, right? Because the first thing that hit me is, so there are 4 dead people. There are 4 dead children who did nothing wrong.
Okay.
You wouldn't change anything. So you have to be more relatable, right? You have to be more likable. Your affect cannot be as cold and matter of fact as it was. And you do not double down on foolishness, right? I think it was a play that went wrong, right? And the whole thing with the person in the affair, I don't know what that added except the text thread about my kid is going to do something stupid. I'm at the school, and that person asked, where's that gun? And you said it's in my car, right?
That
it was some kind of way if I could find a way.
Coming up next, this night before James Crumbley's trial is set to begin here at the Oakland County Courthouse, will he testify like his wife did? And also the storage and responsibility of the gun that James bought and let his son use that ended up being the weapon in the Oxford High School shooting. That's when we come right back. Stay with me. James Crumbley is facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. He has a different attorney than his wife did, and we're going to be watching to see if James actually takes the stand and how the possession and storage of the gun plays into gross negligence.
Do you think that James Crumbley should testify in this case?
Well, look, that's a very difficult analysis in every case. My instinct typically is a criminal defendant should not testify. Again, same kind of thing I just said. You're under no obligation. It's the prosecution's burden to prove somebody's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And a lot of your presentation as a defense attorney is through cross-examination of the witnesses that the prosecution calls. And you can build out your themes and what you're trying to argue through that process. And you can get documents in through cross-examination that are helpful to your side on a case. And then you really do. You have a plan going in, but then you have to decide at the close of the prosecution's case, now what am I going to do? So you may have a plan going in, but sometimes it adjusts depending on the presentation of proofs.
All right, let's go through a little bit some of the evidence here that we saw from the first case and would probably come into play here. The gun used in the shooting, how important is it going to be for the prosecution to show that James bought the gun? Again, that was shown in Jennifer's trial, and it was his primarily responsibility for possession and storage.
Right, so just because that came out in the Jennifer Crumbley case doesn't mean it'll all come in the James Crumbley case, so we'll have to see how that happens. But I do think that you're right. The gun, which was used, is going to be extremely important to what gets presented during the trial. And so if the prosecution can prove, and I think they can, that he purchased it, I think there'll be some issues about whether it was it was a gift. They've got some evidence to that effect, but how much access did he really have? Where was it kept? I think again, we'll see how this stuff comes out, but the gun was in one place. The bullets were in another place. There was a lock but I don't think there's...
But was it used? Yeah.
Right, and I don't think we know that. So was it locked, and then there was a key somewhere else? So, all of that will be important, I think, to his defense, because if as you say, he was responsible for the storage of it, if he did those things, we just had new laws passed in the state of Michigan just this week about how you properly store guns in the home when a minor's in the home, which obviously came to some extent out of this case. Was he doing some of those things? I think that would be more towards him not being grossly negligent. And so what comes in during the case, what evidence comes in on that would be, I think, critically important.
Yeah, I think it's the timeline between what happened Sunday afternoon when Jennifer went to the shooting range with her son and then said she brought the gun home, and then it was James's responsibility from there to take it out of the car, and then what happened on Tuesday morning. I feel like there's a lot that we still don't know right there.
I think that's right, and that's gonna, I assume, be very important to what gets presented in the trial. And I think, as you know, when the jury foreperson was interviewed following the verdict in the Jennifer Crumbley case, she said that seeing Jennifer Crumbley being the last person to have the gun leaving the shooting range was very important to their deliberations.
For me, I just feel like Jennifer didn't separate her son from the gun enough to save those lives that day.
You felt she was the last person known to have had custody of the gun.
Yes.
And then somehow it ends up in his hands.
And I think the responsibility of securing the weapon then falls on her.
So that gives you some insight about how important it is to at least those jurors who had possession of this weapon.
How important is the 911 call from James after hearing about the shooting happening? He went home to check if the gun was there, and then he called 911 saying, "I think it's my son."
911, what location of your emergency? I'm not really sure. I'm at my house. There's an active shooter situation going on at high school. My son goes to high school. I have a missing gun at my house. I need an officer to come to my house right away, please.
That may be helpful to him, okay? That shows what a reasonable person would do. That kind of can tell you he needed to confirm something to know, is this, could this have possibly been my son? I think, again, the defense theme for Jennifer Crumbley, and I assume for James Crumbley, would be, how could I have known that my own child would do something like this? And so if he heard this and said, okay, now I got to go and check, and then he goes and checks, I think he'll say, if he testifies or through cross-examination, they'll try to get this in somehow, I assumed the gun would be there. And when it was not, I was shocked, I was horrified, I was mortified, and I picked up the phone and said what you just said, that I think it might be my son.
Coming up next, we'll take a look at what the prosecutors could be using to show a pattern of neglect. And will James's demeanor come into this trial? That's when our primetime special of James Crumbley on trial continues. Stay with me. In Jennifer Crumbley's trial, we saw a lot of text messages from her and not a lot from James, so that will be new. And we will be watching to see how the defense sets up James as a father and what he knew.
Let's talk about the pattern of neglect. And that was a huge thing that they brought in Jennifer's trial, and the Facebook Messenger, messages back and forth between herself and James, and then also the contact with her son as well, maybe not being as timely in getting back to him. We don't really see a lot of messages so far from James, so this is going to be new. In the prelim, we saw a lot, and then, of course, in Jennifer's trial. But how important will it be for the prosecution to set that part of the case up?
Yeah, look, I think that one of the prosecution's themes is they were both bad parents, okay? You don't go to jail, you don't get convicted for being a bad parent. I'm a parent, I've got teenage children, we all strive to be good parents. And I don't think they lived up to that responsibility here, but that's very different from being charged criminally in a case. And so, some of that's going to come in because I think it leads to the overall point of them being grossly negligent and ignoring warning signs. And how could you be aware to warning signs if you're just an absent parent and those kinds of things? But, that's where this case, again, this case is this case, but, this is again, I said it before, a novel legal theory to charge somebody for somebody else's crime. And, there's lots of things that a child might do that a parent really wouldn't know of. And, I think people are thinking about, well, what if, am I being a good parent? Am I doing the things that I need to be doing to oversee my child? And could I be held responsible criminally for something that my child does? And does this now create a new legal precedent for prosecutors' offices, whether here in Michigan or across the country, to pursue criminal charges against parents? And, I don't know if it will, but I think it's something that we all have to pay attention to.
Now, describe Jennifer Crumbley's demeanor when she walked into your office.
She sat down in the chair, felt a little bit distant.
What do you mean by that?
More just kind of like, it felt like it was a little bit of an inconvenience to be there.
The meeting at the school, when James saw that math paper and declined to take him home, how important will the assessment of the counselor of James's demeanor be? Because we know that he talked about how Jennifer seemed cold and disinterested and wanted to end the meeting abruptly. How important will it be to hear that counselor describe what James's demeanor was in that meeting?
It's going to be important, right? There's enough blame to go around, but that's not what they are prosecuting. We have to look at the cold set of facts. This is the person that's on trial. We don't have the school for their response or lack thereof, right? Mm-hmm. Where you can just stay in a school. You didn't even think to search the book bag. You have a picture of a gun, right? You saw him doing searching for bullets the day before. Nobody thought, look at the book bag, look in the book bag and see if there's anything in there. Nobody thought that. So the school fell short, absolutely. But that's not who's on trial, right? We're dealing with what James knew and when James knew it. So I would love to hear what his affect was in that meeting. I'm waiting because I didn't pick it up on that when I was listening to the trial for Jennifer.
So I think that brings it to our next kind of conversation is really the personality and demeanor of James Crumbley. So we do know more things about him, but he does seem to come across more sympathetic, crying in the squad car, yelling, I love you, when he sees his son.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
After the shooting, depressed that his mom had died and the things that Jennifer took control of all the things. How important will the defense try to make his demeanor seem totally different here?
It's very important because that's what it seems to be, though, right? Like I said, I am clear that Jennifer was in control, right? I'm so clear on that, and he would do whatever he was told to do, whatever he was allowed to do. And there's nothing wrong with having whatever roles you want in your household. That's between you and your spouse, right? But Jennifer was in control of that household. So they want to try to figure out, okay, was she in control to the extent that that gun stays with her or that knowledge stays with her and not James?
All right, coming up next, the blame game. How much of the defense here will be blaming Jennifer in this case? And also your biggest questions about the trial. That's when we come right back. Stay with me.
It's the landmark case that has all eyes on Michigan.
James Crumbley's involuntary manslaughter trial.
Expect more coverage everywhere you turn on Local 4.
We're awaiting a decision.
Stream the trial live and uninterrupted, only on Local 4 Plus.
To have those individuals testify.
Comprehensive recaps wherever you watch.
5 takeaways.
And expert analysis to keep you informed.
One thing that sticks out to me is a damaging text.
Don't miss a minute of the James Crumbley trial, streaming on Local 4 Plus, starting tomorrow.
Our streaming coverage of jury selection here begins tomorrow morning. And of course, you can always see my 5 takeaways on TikTok. All right, we are going to be watching the defense's strategy to see how much they're going to be blaming Jennifer Crumbley. There's a reason why these two aren't being tried together.
Let's talk about James's demeanor. And again, this isn't specifically evidence, but I think still there's so much of the impact of how a jury sees a defendant in a case like this. So we know some things about him. We saw a video of him crying in a squad car after the shooting happening, yelling, I love you," to his son after he saw him after the shooting. And the fact that the prosecution, really drew up that Jennifer was in control of things and that she was the one who really ran things. How important is the tone of setting across who James Crumbley was, almost seeming like he was a hapless guy in all of this?
Yeah, so we'll see what the defense strategy is and how they present their client. But yes, so, to the extent that, and again, I think that's part of the reason why they move for a severance, so they can do certain things. I don't want to call it pointing the finger, but if you're both sitting at the defense table, the last thing you want to do is point at one another, because that's not helpful to either person.
But since they're not, they can.
They can now, exactly. So, and we saw some of that with the Jennifer Crumbley case. She pointed at her husband. She pointed at the school. I'm not sure how effective pointing at the school really is. I think you got to focus on what you did or didn't do. And I think you're right. So, if they have, video of him in the squad car, the police car, crying and telling, his son that he loves him and all these things, I think that, again, that goes to their overall theme or theory, which I don't know whether it'll be, but I assume will be, I had no idea anything like this could even be possible. And it happened, and when it happened, I was shocked. And you can see me, you could see my client, if you're the lawyer, just mortified at what had occurred and what he was finding out. And I think those things can go to that defense.
One of the things that stood out for everyone in Jennifer's case was the fact that when she was asked if she would do anything different, she said that she wouldn't change a thing.
Of course, I look back after this all happened, and I've asked myself if I would have done anything differently, and I wouldn't have.
How important would it be for James Crumbley to take a different tact here and say, we screwed up, but we didn't know?
Right. I think that's right. So again, whether he testifies or not, is a decision he'll make and his lawyer will make. But if he testifies, I tend to agree. I think that, and you have to be careful, because you can't obviously admit to a crime if you're
That's what I was going to say. There's got to be a very fine line there.
But I think it's look, I was not an attentive parent. I could have done better. I wish I had done better. I wasn't a good father. These are hard things for somebody to get up on a stand and say and admit to. But again, I don't think that makes you guilty of a crime. But then you go and shift to, thinking something like this could ever happen, I never in a million years could have imagined something like this occurring. My own son, there's just no way. And I think that kind of testimony would resonate with a jury. Whether that's enough, I don't know, but I certainly don't think saying I wouldn't have changed a thing, I wouldn't have done anything differently helps. And we heard, it wasn't from a juror, but we heard one of the victim's fathers, I can't recall off the top of my head, say that when he heard that testimony, that was particularly problematic for him, that she didn't take ownership of failing as a parent, at least. And so I think there is a lesson to be learned there.
I felt a slap in my face. And it hurts. Something like that hurts, because I would do a lot differently. I would do a lot of stuff different.
What would you say to her if you could say something to her?
I can't say that on here.
When you heard her testimony, what were you thinking? Or, can you share that with us?
I mean, you like to think that as a human being in a situation that we're in, that, you wouldn't have a level of respect and a level of honesty about you to project something positive in the situation. And I didn't really take anything or take much good out of that whole testimony.
Can James get a fair trial?
I pray so. You know, where in the country can he go? It's all over. This was national news. I was stunned that this was national news because, you know, we're used to our stories around here. This was national news because this is the first time a mass shooting person's parents have been held liable and responsible. I go back to Sandy Hook. Right? But, you know, he killed her. He killed his mother who gave him a gun knowing something was wrong with their son. And he went and slaughtered innocents, 26 people?
Yeah.
So this is the first time. So I think the juries, they want to do right. I'm telling you, I've been through so many jury trials in my life, more than I would ever wish on anybody. I believe at the end of the day, they try to do justice, right? And they look and weigh everything and try to come up with the best decision that they possibly can. And that's all they can do, and that's all we can do.
What will you be specifically watching for?
Well, I'll be paying attention to the similarities and the differences. So what are they doing the same? What are they doing different? Maybe some rulings that might be different. The judge, again, so not only is the prosecution gone through this once, but now the judge has too. And the judge may make different rulings or decisions. I think she'll largely be consistent because, you know, on appeal, if you do something over here and you didn't do it over here, that's going to be pointed out. So I'm sure she'll largely be consistent. But remember, she had made some favorable defense rulings in the Jennifer Crumbley case, which kind of were undone as the case was.
Because the defense opened it up in their effort to say, we want to be fully transparent. They brought in things that the affair, alcohol use, that might have been a detriment.
Exactly. So, you know, just because, again, that happened in the Jennifer Crumbley case, now we've got a whole new case, start over. So they may learn some lessons there too. If they have some favorable rulings, they may choose to enforce them essentially and not have them get undone during the course of the trial.
Coming up next, we're going to be answering your biggest questions about James Crumbley's trial from clickondetroit.com. That's when we come right back. There are thousands of you who are watching the Crumbleys on trial along with us, streaming here on Local 4 Plus and on your desktop at clickondetroit.com. And we have dedicated Click On reporters who are not only giving us minute by minute of the testimony going on in court, but also taking a closer look at the legal issues surrounding this case. One of those writers is Cassidy John Cox, and she's with me now to go through, I guess, the top questions that we're getting from a lot of the viewers, and I'm getting them too on social media. So let's jump into the first one, which is, why are the parents standing trials separately? Do they have the same attorneys? We're looking forward to James's trial.
So they do have separate attorneys. The parents were both charged together with the same exact crime as co-defendants. And so they were represented by two separate attorneys who worked under the same law firm initially. Okay. And then in November of last year, they decided we wanted to have our trial severed. So they petitioned the judge, and the judge granted the request, and even the prosecution agreed, saying, yeah, they have the legal right to stand trial separately. And so now there are two individual trials with two different attorneys for both sides.
All right, let's go ahead to what the second question is. Why won't the shooter testify? And this came up in Jennifer's trial as well.
Yes, it did. The shooter has asserted his Fifth Amendment rights. So he has said, I will not testify, and he has no legal obligation to say anything that could potentially incriminate him. And so he's asserted his rights, saying, I'm not going to testify. And the judge said, we cannot allow you to bring in somebody who said they're going to plead the Fifth. So because
it would just be bringing him into the courtroom, sitting in there, knowing full well he wasn't going to answer, and then bringing him out.
Right, and attorneys are legally not allowed to present evidence they know will be inadmissible. And so if they were to bring in somebody who they know is not going to testify when they take the stand, that's grounds for a mistrial. And the judge in this case is doing everything in her power to avoid that.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to our third most asked question online here, and this is coming from you guys. So how will the prosecution strategy change for James Crumbley? And we've been talking about this, you and I, Cassidy, a lot about the nuance.
Of course, there's a lot of speculation on our part, right? But there will be some similarities similarities. We do know that there could be some repeated witnesses, such as the teacher who was shot and injured in the shooting. But we do know that there will also be different evidence. The prosecution focused their case very much on the horse farms and Jennifer Crumbley's extramarital affairs and what she was up to that potentially led to the neglect of her son, right? The case for James Crumbley is very different. And we don't know as much about James Crumbley's life as we did about Jennifer Crumbley, so that's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. But what we do know is that the prosecution will likely focus heavily on the gun and on the weapon that was used in the shooting, because Jennifer Crumbley, when she took the stand in her own defense, she said, my husband is the one responsible for storing this gun, for locking this gun away and hiding it in the home. And so we are going to have to see how that shakes out in court, whether James Crumbley takes a stand or not in his own defense to explain whether he did or did not do that. But we do know the prosecution has asked to bring a witness in that was the previous owner of the gun that James Crumbley owned.
Yeah, which I thought was really interesting. They ruled on that just about a week and a half before the trial.
Right. So the prosecution said, we don't know if we're going to call this witness to the stand, but they did add them to their witness list, and it's possible that the prosecution's really going to focus on that gun.
All right, Cassidy John Cox, you can read everything that she's going to be writing about the Crumbleys on trial at clickondetroit.com, and we'll be answering your questions every step of the way. All right, let's start it all over again. Thanks so much, Cassidy.
Thank you.
So tomorrow starts jury selection here at the Oakland County Courthouse. We can't have cameras inside the court while they're choosing the jury, but we will have reporters inside to make sure that you hear every detail. And then once a jury is seated, we'll flip those cameras on and you'll be able to see everything from opening statements to closing arguments. Make sure you also follow us on social media, and any questions you have during the trial, just ask us and we'll make sure that your questions get answered. You can see everything on Local 4 Plus and clickondetroit.com. It promises to be an interesting one. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for being with me, and I'll see you tomorrow on Local 4 Plus.